subject matter, um, you may see the title and you have thoughts of the red and the blue, game bangers and gang activity, and it reminds you of a time in the 1980s and early 1990s when gang violence was out of control. The movies, the music, sometimes the books, all remind you that life in South LA, South Central, and other places around the nation and were not as easy living. Graveyards are filled of young men and young women who never had a chance to live a life. Family members who have lost ones or loved ones now in grave sites, and the only time they see them is they visit them in that grave site. Father's Day, my book, something I wrote in the storm over South Central, may have been a story like that. But again, those of us who lived during that time, it was not an easy time. It was a very difficult situation to be under. The police, sirens and helicopters, and even, definitely helicopters flying at night, shining the light in the backyard and all the rest, looking for suspects and all that. It was not a very good time to live. But also living under the notion that even walking down the street to the store, your life could be taken just like that, right? And you knew who the gangs were. You knew how they looked like. And you knew that if you wore the wrong color, that was it for you. No matter what, mistaken identity or mistakes, it didn't matter. So a game by nature, a group of individuals who wish to cause harm to a community, neighborhood, or nation. And that's what we're seeing right now with the government gang. I'm not going to call them by the real name. I'm going to call them what they are, a gang. The government gang goes around now, much like the gangsters in that back then, shooting people left and right. Just not a drive-by shooting, but just a stand-up shooting, just the same. Taking people, costing them their lives, their liberty, all that. Not caring, much like the gangs did back in the 80s and 90s. They didn't care either. You tried to talk them out of any harm they're going to do to you. They didn't care about that. And according to the stories in Minnesota, about the same attitude. But the only difference between those gangs back then and this gang now, these gangs realized enough was enough of the killing, of all that, and they just stopped. You don't hear it as much. You don't hear about it as much now. You don't get as many stories, heartbreaking stories from news anchors, from our local affiliates, with bowed heads and heavy hearts, repeating of another drive-by shooting. But you get that now from the government gang, especially what happened to Renee Nicole Good. And isn't it funny? I began to think about what happened 38 years ago in Westwood. Now before that night, the attitude towards, I guess, law enforcement and other officials was like, let them kill each other down there. If it's down there in the South Side, let them kill each other. It doesn't matter to us. We're not going to respond to that call. Another Negro shot, who cares? Who cares about that girl, right? So this is about the same. After a young woman, Karen Toshima, who was just having a good time in Westwood Village, with family and friends, and just living her life, right? There was an altercation, I believe, inside the village between opposing gang members. Shots ran out, and the Toshima family lost a valuable member of the family. Still, my heart goes out to that family. It's not easy losing a loved one through gang violence, but this is exactly what happened. Much in the same way that Miss Good lost her life through gang violence, right? I mean, the way that the government gang is operating now is pretty much in the same attitude and vein as the ones in the 1980s and early 1990s. They kill without impunity. They don't care. They curse out the one person they killed. They don't care. It's like they have no souls. They don't want to care. And you folks watching this, you may have seen that before, or seen the movies, or heard the music before. That was the fact of life here. That was exactly what was going on. You didn't know if you were going to live one day or the next. And right now, we have a government gang that's doing exactly that. They're creating fear. They tried to come to this city and start their mess. They really did. You know, people were like, hey, we can't have this happen. Peace marches and all that. They tried to intimidate the governor of the state, being government gangs, hardcore, hard wiggers, you know, wiggers. And wiggers just out there just doing what they do. But all I can just tell you is that really gang violence, no matter if it's government sponsored or street sponsored, really just street violence, and gang violence is gang violence. You would say, oh, there's no place for it. But actually, if you stop listening to your gang leaders, someone with a cowboy hat who's also very proficient in the gun, if you have a puppy, you know what I'm talking about, who really doesn't care. All the slander about this young woman, Miss Good, that's just like the mayor and the police chief of the city way back then. They would have talked, if they talked slander about a murdered woman or a murdered child or a murdered young man, and that I have heard the police chief back then, when they apprehended someone who was not even involved in any kind of violence, decided, hey, this guy was roughing into the neighborhood. He had to be taken in. He was no good. We had to take him in. But in the case of Miss Good, anything but a child of God, they just accused her of. So this pattern has repeated itself many times before. It just depends on who we salute as our heroes, and those heroes repeat the same patterns to people that want to imitate that person, right? I mean, the head gang leader of the government gang is acting like the leader of the uniformed gang, the badge, ones with the badge back then. But gang violence in any form, coming from someone who's lived in an area for so long and watched the news stories every night of something that may have happened down the street or across the neighborhood that you've crossed many times. When I was in recovery, I used to walk down a certain street in my neighborhood. That block, I keep crossing the same block as a young man that I knew who was shot and murdered on Valentine's night. All nights, Valentine's night. And he was being a gentleman, like he was always a gentleman. Walked his woman home, and as he was on his way to go back to his own home, he was shot and killed. Now, Miss Good, her family, her friends, they will have to travel down that same street that she was murdered. And that memory still lingers on. It's going to linger on for a while. Her children are going to have to live with that for the rest of their lives. They won't see their mother again. Why? Because that gang mentality, that government gang mentality, to take lives without any remorse, without any sense of conscience, ruins their lives as much as lives have been ruined here in South LA. I want you to see the parallel, and I also want you to test your own prejudice when it comes to a story like this. Would you be just as angry that instead of the government, it was a street gang that took out Miss Good? Will you be just as upset or passive if some rogue with this shade took out Miss Good? Or will you just say, oh, she knew better? Yeah. You can say the same thing to the person that pulled that trigger. He knew better too. He did it anyway. Took a life without even thinking about his actions. The same way many of us in this community have seen the impact of gang violence when young men took lives without consequence. So I want to ask you a question. I want to be fair with you. Do you think it is right for a government gang or a street gang to take lives without any consequence at all? Should there be justice? Should we ask for it, demand it, insist on it? Or do we just let our ideology get in the way? Do we say, oh, well, she shouldn't have been out there, when really it was her right to be out there? Now, the way that it went down could have ended much differently. It should have ended much differently. But gang violence and being around that gang culture, especially government gang culture, just convinces you that you're in the right. And if you get in their way, too bad. You shouldn't have been there. I'll leave that question to you. Because ideology does not mean you are right. Ideology can lead you into trouble. It can ruin your soul. And many of us in this country, and I'm talking to people that I know too, ideology has to stop being about ideology and what is right and what is wrong. Too many people have lost their lives before and after last week. Too many people lost their lives in the 80s and 90s across California, across this nation, other cities, you name it. When do we say it has to stop? Because I'm telling you right now, if you don't want it to stop, I guarantee you, as that couple in Portland, Oregon found out, it's only going to continue. And it's going to continue And it may be someone that you know. It may just be you. Think about that. If you liked or disliked what I had to say, don't forget to like or subscribe to this channel. And if you want more social commentary, please subscribe. Yes, I do write about South LA or South Central. And if you want to find out my books, want to check out what I've written in the past regarding this community, don't forget to click that banner up above and take you to my website where you get to find out all of the books I've written, including South LA as a subject. But along those lines, I want to wish you all the best. If you've stayed this long, thank you for watching. I really hope what I said made some sense. And I am very serious about ideology. It does not have to guide our lives the way we think it guides our lives. And that's all I'm going to say about that. And with that, I would like to wish each and every one of you a great day, a great evening, a good week. And always in closing, take care.